Safety and Security meeting. The first item is to verify the meeting has been posted. Julie, has it been? Wonderful, thank you. The next item on the agenda is an opportunity for citizens to speak. Are there any citizens wanting to address the board this evening, or the committee, excuse me? None? We will move on. Our first action item tonight is the approval of the minutes from the November committee meeting. Is there a motion for that? Joe?
I move approval of the minutes as presented.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McCaffrey. And that's an all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wonderful, passes 3-0, Julie. Thank you. Moving on on our agenda, we're going straight to our information items. The first item is an update on the school safety, the status of the school safety grant. Dr. Cook.
So we are now midway through the year. One of the components of the safety, to be eligible for the school safety grant, is you had to commit to having 100% of your staff trained in trauma-informed care. And so we have, of the nearly 1,000 professional staff we have in the district, for all of those individuals, they've completed nearly 60% of the training right now. So we're well on our way to being in compliant with that level of the grant. Our work on installing safety film and ordering communication tools for our schools and such is underway. Getting into the winter season, you have to have temperature has to comply with the installation guidelines. So, so I don't want to say that we have any delay there, but we're appropriately working through it during a relatively minor winter. From a reporting standpoint, the business office and I have completed our quarterly submissions to the Department of Justice, so we are in compliance with both the budget and then the progress updates to the Department of Justice. So I think we're well on our way. We'll continue to work in the months ahead. Knowing that we were awarded 2 rounds of funding, we've got different deadlines to meet based off of the first grant and then the second grant. So I think we're well on our way of meeting the expectations that the state has put on us, and then also our own expectations for getting our schools more secure.
Wonderful, thank you. All right. Our next item of information is the workers' compensation report.
Yeah, Kevin, if you want to come up and then turn your mic on too, if you don't mind. Kevin Miller's here from M3, who's our insurance consultants on the work comp and property and liability coverage, to provide a report that used to go to our old safety committee. I know Amanda was the rep on that at one time, and maybe all of you were at some point in your board career. So from this point forward, if you remember when we formed this committee, we kind of divided duties or reports that would come here versus more of an employee report. So we've decided that this will probably be a semi-annual or quarterly update to you. But I'll turn it over to Kevin to walk you through the report. It's related to workers' comp, and we've done a very nice job, and he'll tell you what average is versus where we are in the savings that we're generating, and then provide a little more detail incident data for you. So Kevin, if you want to take it.
Sure. So the top of the page there just lists some statistics. So you see experience modification factor. The district currently has a 0.83 factor. What that represents is a 3-year rolling average of your actual losses compared to what the state or the Workers' Compensation Rating Bureau thinks your losses should have been. So average for Wisconsin schools, it's 1.0. So you're doing 17 points better than the average schools in the state. What does that mean to you from a dollar perspective? Every point of the experience modification factor represents about $8,000 in premium. So that's $136,000 in savings the district has because of the positive performance on the workers' compensation side. Okay. The right side there, so the other piece, we're trying to focus on snapshots. We don't want to give you years and years of data, so we're just looking at points in time. So the data we're looking at here is from July 1st to the end of 2018. So in that 6-month period, there was $123,000 in incurred losses. So that represents the dollars that were paid out for workers' compensation claims as well as dollars that are in reserve of what the insurance company expects to pay out in the future on those claims as well, okay? And then in that 6-month period, there were 246 claims. Any questions on any of that higher level data? Okay. So page 2, what we do then is we work with the district in breaking this data down so we can identify trends that may be areas of opportunity for safety training, for improvement, so for anything that we can do to make it safer for the employees. So this first part we look at by teacher or by occupation, so by role. And you can see the teachers, we're looking at 92% of the dollars. So that top chart are the total incurred losses, that's the dollar amount. And then the bottom part is actually by the claim count, so how many claims have occurred in each of those categories. This data is slightly skewed when you look at the dollar amounts. So the reason it's skewed is there's one employee that was involved in an accident that it's a little over $100,000. So that teacher claim, most of that $113,000 is represented by one claim. Okay. When you look at the bottom, you see that the claim count, though, still hits pretty heavily in the aide and teacher space. So a lot of our safety focus is in that area from a training, from an awareness, and anything we can do to protect those staff members.
In the aides, more than likely, it's the special ed. You know, the students are bigger and stronger and everything else, so.
Yep.
You remember back a couple of weeks, we did present to you, maybe a couple months at the safety committee and then in a board update from a Friday, we did present the number of staff that we do have trained in nonviolent crisis intervention, which is generally our district response when we start to see an increase in injuries at a school due to staff and student encounters. We then provide additional training to those staff.
Then the page 3, that last page, then takes it and we look at injury type. So what's causing those injuries, again, allows us to identify lost drivers so we can focus on those safety programs. So again, we're looking at dollar amount and the claim accounts, the claim count. So you can see there the motor vehicle accident is the driver on that claim. That's that one teacher. So you can see how the statistics tie together there a little bit, okay? And then as as Joe just mentioned, I was like, well, sorry. As Joe just mentioned, the student interaction is definitely a big driver for the district, and it's a focus with the 207 of 246 claims falling in that space.
So the dollar amount is motor vehicle on that first graph on page 3?
Correct,
We pay more for motor vehicle?
correct.
Or we have? It should,
What do you mean?
I mean, over the last 10 years, motor vehicle accidents have caused, or incidents have cost us more than student interaction?
This is just the last 6 months.
This is just 6 months,
Yep,
so.
this is just 6 months.
So what would it be statistically?
For over a longer period of time?
Over a 3-year rolling average.
Sure, I would have to look at that data specifically. In general, though, for schools across the state, it's predominantly slips, trips, and falls.
Yes, yeah, okay.
Yep, student behavior, and then strains and sprains are the top 3 loss drivers for school districts.
Okay,
So that's student behavior and trips, slips, and falls. They kind of go back and
Right.
forth on who's number one.
okay. So the motor vehicle thing is an anomaly, you would say?
It definitely is, yes.
Okay.
And it wasn't a motor vehicle accident. The staff member was actually hit,
Right.
crosswalk.
I was just wondering, how do we compare to other school districts in terms of a couple of different perspectives? One, are most school districts below on the first page, the average of the state?
Yep.
Or is that pretty, like, only a few school districts are like that? And could you also comment too on some of the more common types of injuries and maybe the types, you had listed here, as to how we compare to other districts?
Sure. So start with the experience modification factor. So that one is a moving target, okay? So it is the average for all the districts in the state. So there's not, we can't have 70% of the districts below 1, right? Because that 1 will move based on where everybody's at. So that 1
Gotcha.
is the benchmark. The other thing we're trying to do is we're working on gathering more data to give you some more benchmarking information to compare to districts of similar size as well. So hopefully in the next report, we'll have some more benchmarking data that we can show for you. And then we'll also look at data, how you've compared to yourself over the years, okay? So those are the other pieces of material we hope to bring in the future from the benchmark comparison purposes. And then the types, really what I just said, the slips, trips, and falls are number one for school districts in general. And then the student behavior is number two predominantly. And then we normally see those strains and sprains pop up.
Okay. So maybe I can ask this a little different manner. Are we, I mean, I know from a financial perspective, we're doing better than the average,
Yep.
but how do we compare in general? Not from a dollars perspective, but just, you know, you obviously have business probably with multiple school districts.
Correct.
And you're interacting with them, and you probably have discussions with our administrators. When you see issues cropping up, you'll say, hey, guys, you know, you'll point things out, and then you'll probably put your heads together and try and figure out what to do. So I'm just trying to get a broader sense of when you're interacting with school districts, how do we compare? And then, you know, are we doing some of the things that we ought to be doing?
Yes, so overall, you compare well. So you're doing things well, would be my initial comment. And where that well comes from is the monitoring of claims. So as claims come in, you're tracking them, and you're doing what you can to control those costs in the front end. That's the important part of the process. Some districts tend to have the claims happen, and then whatever happens with it happens. And then you can't do anything about the dollars on the back end. So on the front end, the claims are coming in, they're getting reported. We're reporting everything, so the insurance company can track those things. And we can look at how many claims are coming in and no dollars are being paid out. And then the staff internally, with Darren's team and then with Buildings and Grounds, make sure we get people back to work as soon as possible. That helps control costs as well. So that's that return to work program that has been beneficial. And then we're also working on preferred provider network. So as people get injured, if they go to a provider for the insurance company that are in network, there's cost savings there as well. So we look at some of those reports from a savings opportunity too. The other piece, your mod. So if you look at that page one, you've gone from the 0.91 down to 0.81, down to 0.72, down to 0.67, and then back up to 0.83. So to give you an idea, there's a minimum mod. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but if you had 3 years of zero losses, you'd get to a minimum mod. So for your district, that might be around 0.6, okay? So when you were at 0.67, that's about as good as you can get, okay? And the concern is, you see, we went from 0.67 to 0.83, and it's like, oh, what happened? Nothing. You're doing great still. So even though you had an upward swing, the 0.67 is very difficult to maintain over time. So I would expect that we can maintain things in the high 70s, low 80s from the experience modification factor, okay?
I appreciate that perspective. It puts things, or that comment, because it puts things in perspective. Because I'm looking at them going, oh, we're getting worse.
Right, that's the initial thought. Yeah.
That's why I had him add the red line, because it does look like the trend's starting to work against us.
Sure.
And it's still, if I could have 0.83 every year guaranteed for the rest of my career, I would take that.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Just a little follow-up on that question. One of the, you asked about how we're doing things. Kevin and I had entered into conversations because I think our old safety committee structure became something we did without much gain from it. So we were already talking about how could we restructure that or get more out of that, and then the board formed this committee, and it kind of jumpstart or forced us to look at a better way of doing the day-to-day things, the communication plan and those types of things. So, so I think that one area that I saw when I got here, we've ended up being a board-driven thing, even though it wasn't your plan. I don't think informing that this committee wasn't the purpose, but I think it'll help us in the long run.
Anything else?
Annie? Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. Moving on to our last information item, we have the facility security improvements.
Hey, Kate, if you want to
Report.
step up and turn whatever mic on. As the board or the committee members know, a big part of the referendum project scope was the improvement of security at all district facilities. So Obviously, the middle school's renovations were our biggest focus and still are, but we're spending 2019 in the planning phase for that work to be done. But we have come up with a lot of work that we hope to do this summer and either summer of 19 or summer of 20 at the elementary levels to get secure entrances constructed. So I asked Kate to come in, and rather than walk you through all of our elementary schools, we kind of have a couple of categories of renovations to make secure entrances. The first one we call the Domino Project, where that's a situation where you're moving an office from the middle of the school out to the front, and then you have to either, sometimes involving 3 spaces, but generally 2, you have to backfill where the offices were. And then you have other ones that are like a Hadfield. The office is already at the front, and it's just restructuring the layout of the doors, and we call those vestibule projects. So we have 5 schools that we're just going to kind of walk you through, but the theory is the same. And if you heard my referendum presentations, it's the same thing with that in and out of the office during the day with the Raptor software in place now, and becomes a complete package. So I'll turn it over to Kate to walk you through our thinking of these buildings and the work that we hope to do. We hope to identify the schools that'll be addressed in 19 by the end of the month, in 19 and 20. And some of it's the scope of the work needing to be done. We have one school that we're still actually working on a fine-tuning the plan. Its lead time is their summer school at that site. You know, there's some logistical things we have to work around, but we hope to hit 6 to 8 elementary schools in 2019. So, and maybe more if things align better. So,
Right.
so Kate, if you want to walk us through, these are the 5 schools, front and back. First page is what they are today, right?
Yeah, first page in general is the existing plan, and the pink hatch shows the area that would be affected by the change. Sometimes it looks bigger than it actually is. Like looking at the first plan, we see Prairie. Prairie doesn't have a second set of doors at all. Most of the schools do, and we'd call it more like a weather vestibule, but Prairie doesn't. So our concept is adding that second set of vestibules that's both for the security aspect and for weather. So it looks like a large impact, but it's not. So if we want to go to the second page, Prairie is one of the vestibule enhancement plans because the main office already was relocated. It had originally been a classroom, but previously the office had been moved to that. It's sort of an odd configuration though. The office is set back, and so we looked at the 2 pairs of doors. We tightened those and added a wall to make it a 1/3, 2/3 vestibule, so students and everyone else, visitors, can still pass through the 2 sets of doors. But you'll notice the door on the right is the new work, the left is the demolished plan. A door into a waiting area, and then a door back into the main corridor. So they'll be contained to the main office to go through the Raptor software. So there's dashed lines, which is where the current door is. We'd get rid of that and make that part of that vestibule part of the main office. It was a very tight office to begin with. There wasn't anywhere for visitors to sit. They had to send them back out to the vestibule next to the door. So this will give it a much more comfortable feel. Staff can also supervise the people waiting until they're directed where to go, and they can also wait for the principal within the office proper. By opening up that space, we're still creating a copy alcove, but we're moving it back into the corner. And you'll see the L-shaped reception desk that gives the receptionist clearer visibility of that reception of the vestibule, so they can see who comes and who goes. And they can still support the principal and the health room behind. So there'll be some casework along the exterior wall with the student files. It is minimal renovation, and it'll just make the whole thing feel more purposeful and also have that secure, we call it the horseshoe, but it's the door in to the office and then the door out.
Real quick, Katie, it looks like the window is just a little bit of window.
In the waiting?
No, in the
Office.
office part. And I know one of the things, it was kind of like a secondary thing that we were trying to accomplish is to have visibility outside for the secretary or
Yep.
who's ever, the personnel at the desk. Would there be any way that we could expand that window? I mean, I guess we could. You can do anything, but
Everything's
you know,
possible.
is that, I don't know if that's, you know, a few bucks or if that's $1 million, you know?
Yep, so that it would be an option. We've looked at that in a couple of cases. Is it effective to add another opening to it? From that person's desk, there isn't a direct view. The principal's office does have the window, and we are adding a window. We would have windows at this part of the vestibule, so that wouldn't be an eyesight, but you'd still see.
Right,
kind of
yeah, I
who's
saw a little
coming.
bit of the overlap there, yeah.
And the other thing, is you do have cameras in place
So
for a lot of
technology
that too.
might provide that line of sight too.
Okay,
You have cameras on all of your exterior doors in most of the schools, and so it might be providing a camera to that front area that they would check. And the nice thing is, so these doors would always be unlocked. These would always be locked. So the person comes in, and then that person would decide whether or not to unlock that door.
Okay.
And they'd be able to see that full vestibule before they unlocked that door.
okay.
And if they did have a camera, they could see if anybody else was coming behind.
So there are other ways besides windows to
Yep.
take care of that. Okay.
And that's something we've been trying to balance, is how far to go with things. We want to make things that are purposeful and things that are effective, but balancing how far. Any questions on Prairie?
So the windows out into the vestibule, I'm assuming they're gonna have the film
Yes.
on it? Have we done any work on that yet?
At Prairie or at,
Yeah.
the exterior of the building and the main entrances, it was the primary project.
Yeah,
And
okay.
that is something that is in the works, and it was something that we've largely completed.
Okay.
But it is in the works. And if you, just to remind you, we did 2 phases of that. We did the primary phase of all the schools was to get the main entrance area. The secondary was to get all the perimeter doors of the building that had glass. That's the phase that we're working on right now.
Excellent.
So the next plan is Randall. Randall is another one of the vestibule enhancements. The office is already located directly adjacent to the door. Randall does have a weather vestibule. I'm going to flip to the second page for this one again of the demo and the new work plan. We would demolish the existing doors. I see they're not shown, so we'll make sure that gets added. We would probably recommend replacing the exterior doors as well. They're not consistent with the other doors that the district has. Another thing to note is that within the entire suite of the main office, where we're looking at the health rooms also, or in this case, the other exterior vestibule, if there's an adjacent health room door to the office or to the school proper, we'll make sure that that has the same locking hardware consistent, so that that's not a weak spot, so that that door would be locked going out all the time unless that person was buzzed through. So that health room aide would have to buzz a student back into the school, because we wouldn't want that path to not have the same consistent locking mechanism that the main door into the school had. Same thing as some of the principal's offices have a second door. So we're looking at that consistently.
And just so you understand the secondary flow or the backward flow, the door that releases you from the office into the hallway, for kids and staff who are already in the building, they can come into the office without buzzing again, but a teacher would have to scan back into the building to get into the hallway. So that flow of kids coming down to the health room or whatever would be just as it is today.
Yep. So with Randall, we will remove the existing second pair of doors that, I'm sorry, is not shown, and then we'll add a set further back, as you see. So that creates that vestibule. And then there's already 3 windows. For 2 of them, we'll look at that opening and add a door with windows in that existing opening, which will be the way into the office. And we'll replace the existing door that people come and go in, and that will be the way out of the office. The other thing we talked about, you see the note to add a transaction window. This is something we talked about with the principal. Since this is the STEM school, a lot of parents are on site often, and they tend to get a lot of traffic coming and going. We thought with the transaction window, that would reduce the number of people that needed to come into the office proper if they needed to drop off something. And they could still do the Raptor software. There'd be a window that you could pass your driver's license or lunch money or
The
hat.
forgotten backpack or.
You know, there's stuff that they wouldn't then have to go through the background check or have some of that process, and it would simplify how many times the door got opened. So that's, we don't have that at most of them, but as it made sense for this one, we did. And there's an existing window also, so kind of to your point, if there's already an opening there, we've evaluated it, and this one made sense to make that a transaction window versus a solid pane.
It's an idea that I certainly hadn't thought of, but it's something that we probably would revisit at the other schools just to see, because to me, it makes a lot of sense to save.
Smart.
I mean, you have to have the right layout to make it make sense, but to see if the staff, because we didn't, because this was at the end of the day of that tour
It was-
day.
Yep.
You know, it wasn't something we talked about at each school. So we have visited every school and met with at least the principal and office staff in some cases to kind of go over what they wanted out of this as well.
STEM is a little bit unique in the fact that there's no busing to STEM, and it's not an attendance area school, so there are limited walkers there. So it is a heavy parent traffic school, similar to how Saratoga is. Virtually everybody is dropped off. Very few kids are riding bikes and walking, given the distance that they may travel.
You should see how fun it is
Oh,
at that drop-off time.
Yes. Been there.
Every board member should be required to drive by during that time.
And try to find a parking spot. Part.
I usually drive by my way here to Monday morning meetings. It's usually like that timeline, so I know to adjust.
Rounded.
It's gotten better over the years, but there's only so much that we can do.
So this one actually looks more pink than it is because that middle area is already a walk-off carpet. It's really just, you know, where the walls are being affected, and it's a patch. This is probably one of the easiest ones. It's changing the window type. There's already the opening there. There's already an opening where we're putting that door, and we're replacing the opening. So in general, this is one of the more easy ones, which is great, especially in an older building.
Knock on wood.
Okay.
One?
Growth plan is one of our domino effect ones. So as you can see in the overall plan, there's 3 areas that are impacted. The main office is centralized. We're proposing to move it to the existing art classroom and the adjacent vestibule. The art classroom is almost 1,800 square feet, which is very large in general for an art classroom, which is one of the good things about this that we're impacting, that the main office doesn't need that full amount of space. So we've been strategic in the other areas that we're touching to make sure we're efficient with the spaces that we are relocating with this. So this one has 3 sheets. So those 3 areas are each enlarged for you. The concept is to move the main office as well as the makerspace to that office block. The makerspace that's existing there is a phenomenal art room. So we're proposing to take over the little strip of speech that's adjacent to it because we can connect to water in the classrooms in that area. So we don't actually have to touch the existing makerspace. So that area is shaded pink, but there'll be minimal construction work to that. We're really only touching the speech area that's adjacent to it. So when we fit the main office components into the art classroom, there was almost 800 square feet left of that block, and so we'll make that the new makerspace. So 800 square feet is less than you would want for an art classroom, but it's enough for a makerspace. So we're swapping those spaces. Looking at the next sheet, which shows that art classroom, the existing makerspace, and new art, it ends up being about 1,350. But really only 250 of that needs work.
Yeah, the makerspace has polished concrete already and
Yep.
the water's close, so it's,
So we'll be
Perfect.
pulling, there's existing sinks and water fountains in these classrooms. So we'll bring the water across. This is all carpeted. So we'll bring the water across and do the demo work in here. And we won't have to touch that space. We won't have to touch the terrazzo hallways. So it's a minimal cost comparative. For the main office, we've been keeping the program consistent. A principal's office, 160 square feet, health room between 140 and 160, and an accessible toilet. In most cases, and most of the elementary schools, there aren't accessible bathrooms. So having that at all the new health rooms and all the main offices that we're renovating will have an accessible toilet room for students. So the third sheet is looking at that existing office space. In the domino effect, speech is the area that is getting renovated next to the makerspace. So we proposed a layout to use those existing offices to have a speech room, an adjacent resource space, and then there's conference and file storage, and those rooms really wouldn't be touched. We could in fact leave the nurse and toilet if we didn't want to touch. That's the one thing that we're still developing of, once estimates of costs come in, how much we touch those existing main offices. In some cases, some of the spaces may not need to be remodeled. They could stay as is, as offices to be used by speech or other staff and aides.
Yeah, with just like your home, once you start doing a project, where do you stop?
Right.
Because all of a
Might
sudden
as
you have
well.
this nice office and then the health room is right there the way it has been in some cases. Do you venture into there in some of these buildings or not?
Our walkthroughs, Monday and last week Thursday, this Monday, last week Thursday, a lot of the moves that we're proposing to make in the schools would be moving specialists, so speech paths, coaches, some smaller special education spaces that would conveniently then move to different locations in the school that wouldn't have major disruptions. You see the art classrooms are moving around, but the domino effect that's created is moving a speech pathologist, is moving a coach, is moving a small special ed room, which then, you're not, again, getting into those heavy, expensive classroom type renovations.
And in general, for the Rose Glen and Meadowbrooks, the main office was adjacent to the staff break and the work. So we're making sure that anything that needed to go with the main office, so mailboxes, copiers, we're accommodating all that in the new main office suite, but we're leaving the break spaces where they are. We're not bringing those with. And nobody seemed to have a problem with that as we talked through with administration.
Thank you, Amanda. Going back to the new office space illustration, you have new borrowed lights? Are we moving lights from different parts?
So lights would be windows. So LITE is the architectural kind of term for like a window. So in the makerspace right now, you have the whole wall is open to
Okay.
the library. So that's again something we've talked through. If that's going to be the new makerspace, would you want to add windows to that? And we'll have the construction manager put numbers to all of these things. So again, we're trying to avoid creeping on things, but we're also trying to make sure the spaces are what you would want and expect in your finished buildings. So it's all things that once the budgets come back, we can make decisions on.
But in this, the word borrowed really is we would be moving something that we already have, or is that
So
a?
again, it's an architectural term. Borrowed light is you're borrowing light from the hallway. So it's
Okay.
a borrowed light would be an
Okay.
interior window.
Radiant
Okay.
light or something that travels through.
It takes me a little to catch
That's okay.
on to that.
No, I'm happy to
but
explain
I got
any
it
term.
now.
Yep.
Now I think I'm ready for the quiz.
So the other thing to just point out is if you look at that makerspace, the door that's at 90 degrees is a new door. The door at 45 degrees is an existing door we're not touching. That sometimes helps people too. It's like a darker shade. It's like gray is existing.
Gotcha.
And the black at 90 usually indicates new.
Okay.
If you've been to our schools, for whatever reason, in the 60s and 70s, we had architects that loved ramps.
Yes.
A lot of our design work, especially when you get into the existing offices, there's steps in the middle of it. So in Bethesda, you walk in, you have ramps going up and ramps going down right away, and we're trying to bring ADA compliance and a flow to these spaces. So though it ate up a lot of our days walking these buildings, and certainly for Bray and for Findorf, you really have to know where these changes in floor plan is. So
It's worth the time to go through because if you're not in a space, you go, oh, I forgot that was a ramp. And then you come up with a scheme that doesn't actually work. So we've been through each school twice now, and it's been very helpful. It's worth the time for sure to make the field visits. And again, all of these are still pretty schematic. We're tightening everything up, but everything, it's still schematic.
I could just add one thing to that. We did meet with all of the principals at the school, and so that the proposed changes that you see are changes that the principal was part of the decision-making on. It's not a decision that's being made, and then that would completely disrupt the flow of what's going on at the school. So the principal input was taken when we walked around this past 2 weeks.
Excellent. All right, Summit View, Kate?
Okay, Summit View is again one of the vestibule enhancements because the main office is already adjacent to the exterior. This pink area again looks larger than it actually is. It's really affecting just 2 walls. It'd be removing the interior set of vestibule and pushing it back about 6 feet. So we would add a wall at the base of that stairs and bring it across. And then it'll still be a 1 door on either side of the office. And so you'd come in, the first door that you typically come in, and then you'd exit out the other side. We looked at quite a few different scenarios, and this kept the office flow the most efficient. Keeping the casework the way it is seemed to work for the staff. Talking to the principal, everybody agreed this was the best solution. But we did study many. It's a lot of weird geometries. As well as ramps, there's a lot of weird geometries.
This is more of a training of parents to come to that specific front door, not either or of the front
Right.
door. But that doesn't take, with good communication. That's why we're doing this now, is not only get out to bid this work and get the lead time items ordered, but to develop a communication plan for the transition. And this one's a little odder because before you had 2 doors you could.
Just some effective signage on the front of the building.
There you
That
go.
was
Takes you to the
fine,
main office. You walk up and you can kind of guess right now, are you going left or are you going right? But if we identify looking at the building, the right entrance as the main entrance to the school, it'll make this that much easier for families and visitors.
In my experience is when it's safety involved, parents pick up on it. They get it. There's an understanding, but there'll be exceptions.
Well, and again, the doors will be open in the morning when students are coming in. I think you have both open now. And if you have nighttime events for concerts, I think you would have both open still.
We're not looking to control evening events. We're not looking to slow down the drop-off in the morning. This is to try to create control for visitors to the school during the school day. And picking a side and working with the staff, the right front entrance door is the one that they prefer,
Right. Yeah.
just
really,
based off of
yeah.
use.
Questions on Summit View? Oh. All right, Meadowbrook, Kate, please.
All right, Meadowbrook is floor plate very similar to Rose Glen, a little bit shorter. So it's very similar solution. It's just mirrored of which side of the building you enter on and where the art classroom is that same side. So this was actually an adjustment we made after our walkthrough. So Darren and Joe, I don't know if you've even seen this one yet, so let me know what you think. We'd had a 3-part domino, and after reviewing the spaces, there's special ed space along the back, special ed music and art. And when we looked at the proportions of the spaces that we needed, the main office fits in, art can slide up and be appropriately sized, music can slide up. And then the special education can fit in the main office. They have a de-escalation room, they have a sensory room, and they had more of a classroom space. This would give them a toilet room off that main space, which is the existing nurse toilet. We'd renovate that to be accessible. It's different proportions of their spaces, but that would allow the 4K classroom and the, is it speech? Speech to stay as is, untouched.
In the redesign part, or I guess in both parts, but looking at number 2 here, you can see the 2 or 3 steps there. That's the ramping right in the middle of the office. So we were running along and you can see CMU wall.
Yep.
So the lounge is what, 2 feet lower?
But 4, yeah, lower.
And what the teacher, used to be the office, but the special ed room would be. So there's that line going across.
We wouldn't use those stairs anymore. So the main entrance into the lounge would be off the library.
So just a little fun fact for the architectural design.
From a functional standpoint too, by moving special education into the middle of the building instead of at a far wing, it's a lot more functional for students and for staff, kids who have needs, sensory type needs. If whatever corner of the school you are in during your regular class now. You're going to the midway point instead of being in a wing in the library, wherever, where you've got to try to get across the school. This is a lot more functional for staff and for students. It is nice to have a toilet room right near the special education room, especially an accessible one.
Yeah.
Because it was Darren's idea, so
You didn't show any of the bad ideas I had.
you don't have bad ideas.
Appreciate that.
You don't have bad ideas.
So this is like I said, this is a sample of a dozen schools or whatever we're looking at. But it's really repetitive to a lot. But as you can see, some of them are very extensive in terms of space. Others are like Randall, and it's moving a bank of doors and punching a doorway into a wall, and it should be very clean. Hadfield would be
Hadfield
another
is
one
very
that's
similar to
very
that.
similar to that.
And like some of those have had carpet replaced, and we already have that, you have that carpet, so we can patch some of the areas. So, you know, that line of where the, you know, renovation work has to happen doesn't get continued if unnecessary.
Any other questions? Yes,
Hey, just
Joe.
a comment, I really like the office space, being, I was wondering how you're gonna handle this school. But getting it to where it is, and I know that's the goal of all of these, to get it up, to get up front where people are coming in. I was really wondering how you're gonna accomplish that with this school. I mean, it might have been easy for you, but, when I was trying to think through schools, because there's another school that's kind of like this design, isn't there?
Rose Glen and Meadowbrook are very
Yeah.
similar.
Bethesda.
And Bethesda.
Yeah, those
Bethesda's
three are very
office is
similar.
the same, the building footprint. Bethesda's been my most challenging one, but we have a good solution.
Bethesda has their mechanical room right up by the front door that we have to work around. And I think that's the wild card in Bethesda, right? Is
A
having to
little
work.
bit. So Bethesda's gonna have a split level office.
Bethesda's
layout
gonna
for-
what? I'm sorry.
Bethesda will have a split level office. So when you come in, you'll still have the office off the vestibule, and you'll have the main reception area will be vetted with Raptor, and there's a door in and a door out, so everything is consistent. But then as you progress into the building, it ramps up. And so there'll be 4 steps in the office area, but there's also a ramp, and there's still space to get a door in. So it's still accessible. You can go in and out like anybody else would. If you need to meet with the principal, you can either take the stairs in the office, or you can go out and use the ramp. So they'll still feel, it's the best solution we came up with.
Same layout
Ramps
as,
ramps that run east and west too, right?
You ramp down to the library and classrooms, or you ramp up to the cafeteria.
George Bush.
Yeah, from a practical standpoint, 40, 50, 60 years ago when these buildings were built, it would have been nice if they would have taken the dirt from one half of the building and moved it to the other half of the building and created a level building for us to work with it.
Get a
It
little
would have been
grader in there or
minimal,
something.
it would have been minimal movement of soil in order to accomplish this, but
Some exterior stairs
we have a
instead of
flood.
interior ramps.
We have a nice flow.
Yeah, right, you got a waterfall.
it's have to open up one set of doors now.
Right, and it's out.
But from an
that's-
architectural, functional piece,
But
it makes it more difficult.
Kate hit on the most important thing. That office, though it has the steps, is still ADA accessible.
ADA compliant, everything. And it's still the same experience of somebody coming into the building, checking in, and being released back into the building for everybody. Everything will be accessible. The other thing at Bethesda is right now, there's actually like locker rooms that are not used at an elementary level. One's being used for gym storage, and one's being used as an effectiveness coach. And that's part of the renovation area. And so all that space will be used more efficiently, and
You'll be hard pressed to find an elementary locker room today that's a locker room.
Yeah.
Or all storage or
it's
quasi
the
offices.
showers, there's like the open showers that are being used for file storage. So that'll be part of that block that's being renovated. That one's come together really nicely.
Yeah, right, well, right, exactly.
So, in looking at this, and again, we're fine tuning the financials on all this, we'll have a more secure entrance, but also I think you'll have a better first impression of our facilities for people who are coming in from the outside. It'll be the first thing they see is this new entryway. So I think that's a side benefit, certainly not our main priority.
Well, thank you, Kate, for all your work and for the information. We appreciate it. move, yes.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
For Joe, I would assume. Are we gonna move forward to any of the segmentation we've been talking about with this?
We're looking at the primary entrances first.
Okay.
We're looking at where building segmentation would make sense. But within the scope of the referendum and the safety grants, we're trying to capture as much big work as we can accomplish. When it comes down to those banks of doors, you don't ever want to minimize cost. They're not that expensive,
Right.
and should we in the future need to do that, we could look at building that as part of our capital budget.
Okay.
That it could be accomplished piece by piece. But when you're operating without secure entrances to the schools, we
Yeah,
wanted to
right.
prioritize that piece first.
But that's still on the list.
That is still
Yeah.
on the list, and it's still something that we're investigating, and Kate and the Bray team have looked at some of our schools, and, this might be a good spot for it. I'm meeting actually with the police department next week to just walk around and show them what some of our ideas are. That would be a question that I'd ask them, is where would you recommend segmenting this building if you were in charge?
Excellent.
The other thing you have with the segmentate, you can do those anytime. It's not
You're not
it's
moving an
not summer
office.
sensitive.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
you-
right.
You can go in spring break or Christmas break and pop those doors in. So I guess we've put it on the second tier of things to tackle.
All right, thank you. Anyone else follow up with that? No? Okay, next up on the agenda, we do not have discussion items. Next piece would be other business, and the first item there is recommendation for further committee meetings. Anybody have anything they'd like to bring forth? Joe, anything in the back burner there?
Just looking at kind of the pacing of some of our work, we had several months where we were meeting on a regular basis. Darren and I have had some conversations about, based off of where we get with our work with Bray and Findorf on the referendum, and then also how things progress with the safety grant. Maybe we would need to meet in February for an update to give you guys an idea, but that perhaps would need to, we could kick that out perhaps to March. But we'll be in contact with you just based off of what our workflow is and what we think is going to be a valuable update to the committee.
Speaking of the referendum work and the entrances at the elementary school, I don't know if we'll have the numbers finalized for our February FNF meeting, but it gets to that point where, are these projects safety and security, or are they facilities and
Right.
financial? So I'll probably email the chairs of both of the committees and say, here's where we're at. Do you want me to come back here with all the school's plans and have you look at them, or don't you? Does FNF also want to see what this pot of work is going to cost and how we, it's just a logistical thing. It's nothing that's hard to figure out, so.
All right, we'll be looking for those emails. Thank you. All right, if there are no other pieces to add to other business, our next safety and security meeting is currently scheduled for Thursday, February 21st at 6 p.m. here in this room. And if there's nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you.